Last Sunday morning, I talked about the danger of favoring a child or one child over the others in a message called When Parents Favor Children. We learned from the mistakes of Isaac and Rebekah, and then from the mistakes of Jacob raising their children. For the next couple of weeks, I want to stay with that theme of raising kids, and this morning I want to talk to you about things we did right as parents. Some of you might be better suited than me to give this message. I know for certain that Grant Tracy Rogers did a great job raising Shelby. My Sarah and Emily both had a part in that before she started school. So I'll give you what we did, and you can kind of be the judge if it was a good idea. Let me say this. Last week, happens a lot after messages, somebody will come up and say, I wish I'd have known that 50 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Well, me too. I didn't know all this from the beginning. You know, we took a baby home and we're having to figure it all out. And so what I'm sharing with you today is from all these years of learning. It's not something I knew the whole way through. We made mistakes and learned from them. And so hopefully you can learn from mine and not make the same ones. So this message has 22 points. In seminary, I was taught to have 3, okay? So obviously, I'm not a good seminary student. This message will take at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. So let's get started. In your outline, the first thing we did right as parents is, number 1, we loved each other well. We loved each other well. Look at these verses. Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives, and Titus 2:4. The older women are to encourage the younger wives to love their husbands. Our girls grew up seeing how a husband ought to treat a wife and how a wife ought to treat a husband. Betsy grew up with that luxury. I did not. My dad was dead. We had an alcoholic in our life for about 10 years, 6 to 16. He was abusive at times when he'd go on drunks. I had no concept of how to treat a woman. Fortunately, in my senior year of high school, I met a guy named Bob Dukes who treated his wife like she was the queen of the world. And that's where I got it. And so that's what I've tried to do, treat Betsy like she's the queen of the world. We kissed and hugged a lot in front of them. It embarrassed them at times, but it gave them security. Children primarily get their security from how the parents love each other. And we loved each other well. Number 2, we sought to follow the Lord fully. We sought to follow the Lord fully. In Deuteronomy 1:36, it says, Caleb followed the Lord fully. We talked about him in our James study on Wednesday night. Listen closely. We didn't try to look like good Christians. We tried to be good Christians. It was never an appearance. Oh, we need people to think we're this. It was always who we were trying to be. We were not and are not perfect Christians, but we've always been genuine ones. Several times along the way, our girls thought that they couldn't do this or they had to do that because they were the preacher's kids. And we told them every time, we will never expect you to do something or not allow you not to do something because you're the preacher's kid. Everything we'll do will be because we're Christians. And that's how we've raised them. We sought to follow the Lord fully. Number 3. So by the way, stop there. They know what that looks like. Do your kids know what that looks like? Is following the Lord fully the natural thing for them to do because it's all they've ever known? If you're a Christian when they were born, that's what it ought to be like. Here's number 3. And it's related to number 2. We modeled and taught godly behavior. We modeled and taught godly behavior. In 1 Corinthians 11:1, it says, be imitators of me just as I also am of Christ. We taught them how the Bible tells us to live. As a verse we used last week, when we sat down, when we rose up, and when we walked in the way. We were always looking for real life examples, good and bad, about what the Bible talked about. So somebody does the wrong thing, pays the price, lesson. Somebody does the right thing, benefits, is successful, lesson. So you go through life looking for real life examples to say, see, here's what the Bible says. This person's benefiting because God has set life up this way. And so you teach them all the time. And we lived what we taught. They never heard me telling you to do something that I wasn't doing at home. We, including Betsy, practiced what I preached, and we walked what I taught. Listen to this next statement. We'll give it to you twice. If you're not living what you're teaching, they're resenting what you're saying and doing. If you're not living what you're teaching, they're resenting what you're saying and doing. There's a lot of preachers' kids mess up badly because they see daddy be one thing at church and somebody different at home. We modeled and taught godly behavior. Again, did we do it perfectly? Of course not. But we mostly got it right. Number 4, we were more committed to who our children would become than to how our children felt. We were more committed to who our children would become than to how our children felt. In Galatians 4:19, Paul says, "My children, I am in labor until Christ is formed in you." Paul says, it's like I'm in labor. It's so painful for me to want to get you to this place. We cared more about how they turned out, what kind of people they became, than we did about how they felt toward us at any given moment. We cared more about their character than we did our approval rating. We were trying to raise adults who would love, not grown children who loved us, but others didn't like or couldn't stand them. So here's the deal. You want to raise your kids so that everybody else thinks they're great, not so that they think you're great. If everybody else thinks they're great, you're pretty great. That make sense? But if you raise them to think you're great, you'll raise a spoiled brat. You'll raise somebody who doesn't know how to play well with others, who doesn't know how to follow the rules. You'll raise a problem. They may love you, but there'll be a problem. Another verse from last week, all discipline seems to be sorrowful, but afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Here's one story of the result with us. When Sarah was at Carson Newman, she worked at Walgreens near Fulton High School. She tried out this management internship program. During that same time, Emily's senior year, she had so many credits, she just went to school till noon, and she also got a job there, worked at that Walgreens. So they were there both about a year or so, or school year, something like that. When each of them turned in their notices to quit, the manager wept. He literally cried because he was losing such good employees. If you know anything about, if you hire people, you know it's hard to find good employees. But they literally wept. Never sacrifice long-term character for immediate comfort. Well, I just don't want them not to like me right now. No, what you need is to want for people to like them later, not for them to like you. We're more committed to who our children will become than to how our children felt toward us at any given time. Number 5. God determined how we raised our kids, not other parents. God determined how we raised our kids, not other parents. I'm sure you parents hear this today all the time. Well, so-and-so's parents let them fill in the blank. No one else's parents had anything to do with how we were raising our girls. Nobody's. We were getting our instructions the best we knew how from the Lord. Other parents, even Christian parents, had nothing to do with what we would do or not do as parents. And by nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. We weren't taking our cues from them. We were getting them from the Lord. We learned several things the hard way. Don't assume that other Christian parents are raising their kids the way you're raising yours, especially if you're getting this right. If your kid's going to their house, even Christians, even people in our church, you ought to ask questions like this. What will they be doing while they're there? Well, they're going to watch movies. No thanks. We won't do that. What will they be allowed to do? Unless you know a couple really well, never assume that they're on the same page that you're on in parenting. How many of you have gotten burned besides us? One time we let Sarah go to somebody's house, a grandmother's house, okay? It's not a grandmother in church. So they go there, and she's a little girl, and they watch this movie on TV about this monster in this mirror. And so, you know, we don't know about it, so they weren't supposed to watch any movies. That was one of the questions we asked. Well, they did. And so the next night she's home, she's having nightmares. She won't sleep with us. Well, she never slept with us. She was terrified. She came in there, won't sleep. No, you can't do that. Get back and do it. Oh, no. Spanking, put her in the bed. She came back again. No, I won't do it. Spanking, put her back to bed. She came back again. I'm a slow learner, but I finally figured out she'd rather me be spanking her than be in that bed by herself. What's going on? So she finally told us about the movie. And of course, right at the bottom of her bed is this huge mirror on the dresser. Supposed Christian grandparents who told us they wouldn't watch movies. I should have gone over and smacked her in the name of Jesus, smacked her for lying to us. In John 21, Jesus is telling Peter about his future. Peter points to John and says in John 21 and 2, Lord, what about this man? And Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Jesus essentially told Peter, what he does or what happens to him is neither your problem nor your business. You follow me. You do what I say. Well, all the other kids at the school, their parents let them. Irrelevant. All the other kids at the church, their parents let them. Irrelevant. The question is, what do we think the Lord wants us to do as parents? Other people's parents aren't going to answer to God for how you raise your kids. You are. You are. What is that to you? Well, everybody else's kid at church gets to do it. What is that to you? Everybody else's kid has a cell phone. What is that to you? God determined how we raised our kids, not parents. Number 6, we protected our kids or our children. At least we did the best we could. That one slipped by us, obviously. We protect our children. Look at 1 Peter 5:8. Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Your job as a parent is to protect your child. Physically, we usually get that, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. As their kids, you worry about protecting them from strangers. But as they age, you got to protect them from having the wrong friends, from dating the wrong people. Some of you have to protect your kids from your birth family, a cousin, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling. You have to protect them from the ungodly influences of the ideologies of our lost culture. You have to protect them from liberal teaching and preaching. You need to know everything that they're watching and listening to. By everything, I mean everything. They've got a phone with music on it. Have you listened to every song on that list and looked at the lyrics? What are they watching? If they got a phone, I'm just telling you, you don't have control. You lost it the day you bought that phone. Kids are thinking, ooh, I hate this preacher. Let's go to another church. That's why kids are so depressed. Suicide's up. Raising more and more kids who can't function. Most of that accelerated exponentially with the smartphone. The smartphone can be a real smart thing. It can be a real bad idea. You got to protect them from that. What are they watching? Otherwise, the devil steals them right out from under your nose and devours them. It happens more often than not to church kids. Parenting, listen, is the most difficult work you will ever do in your life. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. The average parent today just thinks about the photos and the videos they can post on social media, which makes their kid look cute, which makes them cute. Some treat their children like puppies. I'll pat you on the head and play with you when it's convenient, but then I want to stick you in front of a television or give you a tablet so I don't have to mess with you. Am I in the right generation? Parenting is a 24/7 battle. And if you don't win it, your child loses, you lose, society loses, the church loses. Your future will be filled with grief instead of joy. Don't miss this. Some of you need to hear this. You have to protect your child from themselves. From themselves. They think they know more than they know. They think they're more mature than they are. Didn't you? I mean, how many of you knew everything about the time you were a freshman in high school? Didn't you know everything on the planet and thought your parents fell off a turnip truck or something? Thought they didn't know anything, did they? No, the older you get, the smarter they were, weren't they? They think they can handle situations they can't handle. Some of them it'll get them date raped, and some of them it'll get them in jail for being around people doing drugs. You do want to give them more and more freedom as they age, and you do want to let them make more and more of their own decisions. But you've got to have the discernment for when they're ready for that. When they're ready for that. We had a guy that was, I guess he was 3 years older than one of our daughters preying on her. And boy, he was a con man. He would come to the house, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You go, boy, what a great kid. He's probably in jail today. We found out he was lying. He was writing our daughter notes, telling her to lie to us and telling her if she'll cry, it'll go off better. He was a con man. And luckily, we figured him out. We always had the FBI going, the Family Bureau of Investigation, okay? And if you don't have one, you need one. Not as corrupt as the one we had in the government, but you need a good one. I'm Rocky Ramsey, and I approve that message. You've got to discern when they're ready. Premature freedom will result in problems today, many of which can't be fixed. A selfie sent on the internet to somebody or something else. They can make mistakes they can't fix. You got to make sure they don't do it. We never let our kids watch an R-rated movie. We never took them to one. We never had anything like that in our house. We had one TV in our house, and it was up in the bonus room. I was at a house a couple weekends ago. On one floor, they had two gigantic TVs, and they had a gigantic TV upstairs. I'm sure there was a gigantic TV in the bedroom, and we had one time. It's still there. It's a dinosaur. We got another one now downstairs, but anyway, it's another story. All the kids are gone. Betsy and I watch it. We watch Hallmark and Blue Bloods. All right. But our kids never just turned the TV on and watched it. You say, what do you mean by never? I mean never. If they were watching something, we knew what they were watching. Listen, parents, the worst thing your kids can watch now is Disney. And Disney's going to steal them right out from under your nose because they are LGBTQ plus committed to the death. It's already crushed them financially, but it isn't going to stop them. And how do you raise a Nazi Germany? You get the kids. You get the kids. That's what's going on in America. The government wants to be the parent and not the parent. Am I in the right room? The school board wants to decide what your kid knows and learns and who they have to tell what to. The doctor wants to know secrets you can't know about. You need to get a new doctor. See, everybody else wants to take your kid. Remember that Hillary Clinton, it takes a village? What they mean is the village wants to raise your kids, and how they're raised becomes none of your business anymore. So if you don't understand that's what's going on in America, you need to look at the news every once in a while. So you look at all that. If this bothers you, you ought to ask yourself why. And you know why it probably is? Because if I don't have TV on, I'm going to have to work a lot harder at this parenting thing. I'm going to have to be more creative. I'm going to have to spend more time with my kid. And frankly, I work and I'm tired. If you're not going to raise them, don't have them. You ought to really think about that. When you have a baby, let me tell you, your life is shot. If you're doing this right, your life is shot. For the next 20 years, it's going to revolve around that. Don't sign up for it if you're not willing to go do it. Some of you think, boy, you're pretty rough on your kids, aren't you? I am so pleased with the results. How'd yours turn out? Did our girls like it? No. They complained all the time. But here's what's funny. Both of them babysat Shelby when she was little, and they would come home and tell us what she did and what they did. And what they did every time was what we did to them. So they'd complain when we did it to them, then they'd go do it to Shelby. Well, I told her this and I did this and whatever else it was. They parented just like us. They parented Shelby just like us. Monkey see, monkey do. I may be a little bit biased, but I think my two daughters are fantastic mothers. Not good, not great, fantastic mothers. We protected our children. Number 7, we sheltered our children from our pain. We sheltered our children from our pain. Pastors and wives suffer a lot of pain. People talking about them, people lying about them, people trying to undermine them, all this other stuff. I've read an article this week, this former pastor called being a pastor, quote, an awful existence. Said he wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's why so many drop out. Only 1 out of 10 people who start ministry retire from it. It's really difficult. It was especially hard for us because I was out here in the country in the middle of nowhere. We had the first band in the denominational church in Knoxville. We started projecting lyrics on the screen. This was 30-something years ago. And boy, I just got clobbered. I was the devil. I'd gone liberal. Almost everybody in this community was talking about me. And none of it was good. I took a beating. Some of you know I could have gone to First Baptist Oxford, Mississippi during that time. And I didn't go. One of the reasons I didn't go, I couldn't. They wanted me to take First Oxford and turn it around like I did this church. And I just didn't have it in me. I'd been beaten to a pulp. I didn't have it in me to do it again. I just didn't have it in me. So that's one of the reasons I stayed. So we got all this pain, but we sheltered them all we could from it. Look at the verse of what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 2:7. Such a one might be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. We were surviving. It would have crushed them. When I was young, my mom said several times, it's imprinted on my DNA. We're going to lose the house. We're going to lose the house. We're going to be homeless. If I lose my complete mind, I'll never forget that. That shouldn't have been my burden. And your burdens ought not be your kids' burdens. So don't put the burdens of adulthood on your children, and also don't use them for your therapy. Some parents end up using their kids for their therapy. Don't do that. We sheltered them from pain. Number 8, we never modeled any behavior that could be destructive to our kids. We just didn't do it. You know, we live in a day where people in general, Christians also, are afraid of living too well, of their lives being too clean, of being too holy, too good. Where did we ever come up with that? We saw last week or a couple of weeks ago how Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his children, our kids tend to take things further than us. They tend to do in excess what we do in moderation. We decided that there were things that if they ever did them, they would not have learned them from us. As the old saying goes, we didn't drink, smoke, cuss, or chew. So say you're going to drink or do drugs or whatever else. Yesterday, Matthew Perry, the guy on Friends, died. If you hadn't seen the news this morning, he died yesterday. Apparently drowned in his hot tub. Who knows if he was on drugs or something. It said in the article he spent $9 million trying to beat his addiction. $9 million. If somebody has to go in rehab for doing something, why on earth would you ever touch it or get near it? Doesn't make any sense, does it? And whoever took their first drink and said, what's your goal in life? Say, well, I want to be a worthless alcoholic is what I want to be. Whoever smoked their joint and said, well, I hope to become a drug addict as an adult. No. The devil just lures you in, and when you think you've got it, you find out it's got you. You're saying, well, I can quit. Sure you can. You've quit hundreds of times, hadn't you? We never modeled any behavior that if they did this, it would hurt them. Look at these verses. Ephesians 4:27, do not give the devil an opportunity. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from every form of evil. I like the King James says, all appearances of evil. If I don't drink and my children struggle with alcohol someday, I'll have grief. If I do drink and my children struggle with alcohol someday, I will have grief and I will have guilt. See, I'll never have guilt. The monkey saw, the monkey did. The second monkey did more than the first monkey, but the second monkey did what they did because they saw the first monkey do it. Hope you followed that. Number 9, I'm going to spend a lot of time here. You're going to need it, okay? We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. You've heard this before. Rules without relationships tend to result in rebellion. So you're just bossing them around and don't have a relationship with them, it's not going to go well. We had a lot of fun at our house. Obviously, when I'm preaching, I'm not trying to entertain you or be a comedian, but I thought I'd spend a little time today showing kind of the other side of me and maybe generate some ideas for you to have some fun with your family. At our house, we played and laughed. Emily was our comedian. She began what we call the family thesaurus. So we have all these phrases that we use that if you came to our house, you'd hear them and go, what in the world's that? One of them is keep those words inside your head. That one came from Shelby, but that's one of them in the thesaurus. So we use it. We got our own kind of family language. Sarah had and still has that outrageous, contagious laugh that she has. The two of them would sing sisters. They would sing, we brought them to senior adult night, and senior adults back in those, they'd have meetings, and they'd have somebody come in and do all these nicey things. Well, we brought our girls in, and they sang to the senior adults, I am the weenie man, okay? It was fun. Emily would sing like Ethel Merman. We played board games. I played Pretty Pretty Princess. How many of you men have ever played Pretty Pretty Princess? I wore the tiara, I had the earrings on. We were serious when we were serious, but we were fun when we were fun. Emily was always introducing new phrases in the thesaurus. There you go. I've actually got a parcel in my mouth, and so it's amazing I don't lisp or something. But anyway, as a toddler, instead of saying, hold me, she'd say, hold you, hold you. So that's what we'd say, hold you, hold you. If she wanted more something, she'd say, morsh, morsh, morsh. So if you're eating something, you want a little more, morsh, morsh. If someone passed gas, not that anybody in our family would ever do such a vile thing, she would say, shoo-wee, did you smell this? So we use that one. Still alive all these years later. How many of you have seen the movie Ernest Goes to Jail? Okay, if you haven't seen that movie, you haven't lived, okay? You need to put it on your bucket list. Well, in that movie, there's a bank security guard named Bobby. He probably weighed about 90 pounds, about 85 without the badge. At one point in the movie, he pulls out his gun. The barrel's about as long as his arm. And he makes this dopey face. Well, Emily became Bobby and that pose and that face. It was Bobby doing everything. Bobby playing basketball, Bobby eating dinner. You name it, she did it. Her best rendition was one day she came up with Bobby on the toilet. I'll let you figure that one out. But anyway, we laughed and laughed and laughed. We were at the beach when the girls were young, and I was laying there asleep, had something over my face. I was just laying there asleep on the beach, my head covered. And the girls were there, Betsy and the girls, and they were eating animal crackers, and they discovered that seagulls love animal crackers. And so they threw a few out, and the seagulls come in and eat them, and so then they get the smart idea, let's put them all around Daddy at that time, Doodah now. So I'm laying there asleep, and they put these animal crackers right by me. So I wake up from a dead sleep, and I'm surrounded about this close to about 10 seagulls. I jump, they fly, and then it startled Emily. Emily had the bag of what was left, and it was high tide or low tide, and so the beach was real long, and so Emily grabs the bag and starts running. Well, the seagulls go after her. If we'd had this on video, we'd won that $100,000. So she's headed for the beach. She's like in maybe the first grade, maybe younger. And she's got this bag of animal crackers, and there's about 30 seagulls about this high off the ground coming after her. And eventually she just gets scared and flings it up in the air, and they're just picking them out of the air. We tried to restage it in video, but we couldn't do it. But the first time, it was something else. We had fun. Now, I know I give cats a bad rap sometimes, but I like cats, especially the way the Chinese prepare them. Just kidding. I'm killing you cat people, aren't I? Now, we've owned a number of cats through the years. The most famous of those cats, I eventually just referred to as the slut. Okay. She would get pregnant, nurse her kittens, have kittens, nurse them, and get pregnant again before we get her fixed. And this happened over and over and over. And so we're talking to the girls about it, so they know about it. Again, Emily's like first grade or something. So she realizes that this cat has to quit nursing so we can get her fixed so she'll quit having all these kittens. So one day we come home and we see the cat there, and Emily has duct taped all of its nipples and its rear end. Okay? True story. As you can imagine, the cat didn't appreciate it. So then we had to pull them all off. And anyway, so next time you're at Home Depot or Lowe's, find a worker and say, can you show me where the duct tape is? And have them take the duct tape and say, did you know you can use this for birth control? Enjoy the moment. We kept a stash of dress-up clothes that the girls would wear, they'd put on, and it's almost a weekly thing, they'd put on a play. Of course, Sarah was going to be the star, and Emily was going to be what's left, okay? Sarah was the oldest. So Sarah would be Dorothy, Emily would be Toto. The grandkids have done the same thing. So we've got all these dress-up clothes, hats, wigs, shirts, clothes, mustaches, all kinds of things. They're growing out of it. Bummer. Betsy and I used to dress up as an over-exaggerated preacher and his wife. The look was kind of chick hobo, okay? I'd slick my hair back, she'd put her hair up in a bun or something, and we'd wear Bubba teeth, and we'd go out and visit the flock, okay? So we'd go to members' houses. We were loud, over the top. If you were at our end of summer party, you saw me tell the story of Samson and the Philistines, so you might have some idea of what that might be like. On my second trip to Israel, we had a guy who was really funny. His name's Shmulik. He lives in Tel Aviv, keeping up with him through all this going on over there now. He has a bomb shelter in his apartment. He later came to the States and stayed with us for several days. We were supposed to pick him up at the airport, so we decided we'd dress up like homeless people. And so we're dressed up like homeless people. Our hair's all messed up. We've got Bubba teeth on. And we're standing there at the airport by the water feature, you know, when you come through and you're coming out. We're standing there holding a sign that says, Shalom, y'all. Okay? And so Shmulek comes down, he starts coming down through there, kind of sees us out of the corner of his eye. So he's trying not to make eye contact. You know what I'm talking about? You see somebody like that, you want to look, but you don't want him to know you're looking. So he kind of tries to avoid us. He walks right past us, and then we had to run him down and tell him who we were. Well, he thought that was really funny. And so then we're on our way to our house. And on the way, I was telling him, I said, you know, our house isn't that nice, but it's home to us. And so I pull into this house that was abandoned and run down and kind of looked like Green Acres or something. And he's thinking, what on earth have I gotten myself into? We were having a blast. And we'd play gags with people who came to our house. If we were using the cooler, we had this fake human hand. And we'd put it in the cooler in the ice. So somebody'd go over there to get them a drink out of the cooler, and they'd pull it up, and it looked like a body was in there. Okay, that was fun. Some of you are thinking, I'm never going to their house. It gets worse. So not only this, I went out and bought a monster to go in the toilet. So you had this monster that goes in the toilet, and his arms have suction cup to the lid, and the rest of him's under the seat. And so if you go and pick up the lid, this monster's head comes out at you. It's right by the dining room and the kitchen, so we would have people over, put the monster in, and just wait. Ah! They found the monster. Then everybody else would have to go look at the monster. Betsy's dad, for Father's Day one year, wanted a fart machine. Okay? For those of you who are worried about the word I just used, it's not the first time I've said it. Years ago, next door, I was preaching a message, and there was a kid on the second row coloring like kids do. You know, you think he's not paying a bit of attention in the world to what I'm saying. And I accidentally merged faith and heart. Okay? Didn't mean to, but I did. The little boy's coloring, he stops, says, Mom, Rocky said fart, and goes right back to color. Okay? Well, Betsy's dad, that's what he wanted for Father's Day, so we got him one. Now, Betsy's dad's the only person I've ever seen do this. He would put the speaker on himself. And he'd go visit shut-ins, and he would tell them, say, boy, my stomach's just been hurting all day. And then he'd start firing that thing off. So we had to have one. So we got one. So we'd have people at the house, and I'd we'd have them over for supper, and I'd decide who I wanted to sit in the magic seat, and then under the magic seat, I'd put the little speaker. It has a remote control, so we'd be sitting at dinner, and I could fire it off. There it goes. And the first time it happened, everybody that didn't just happen, did it? And then after a few more, all of a sudden, people are looking around, and eventually the person sitting in the chair, who I'd usually sit the person there I think would be the most embarrassed by it, that person would say, it's not me. I don't know what it is, but it's not me. We had a lot of fun with that. We also had several versions of realistic-looking plastic dog poop. We'd have people over, set it right by the front door to see who would say anything about it. Most people didn't. Before we built this building, next door, the main entrance to the educational area was the office doors. And so as we do now, we had greeters out there. At that time, there was a guy who was kind of the head greeter named Mark Carter. Those of you who know Bill Davis, Bill's wife Sheila is Mark's sister. And so Mark was out there greeting one day, and Betsy brought the dog poop from the house. And she parked about 15 yards from the door, and she set that poop outside the car. And so she walks over to the front door and says, who's in charge around here? Mark said, well, I'm in charge. What's the problem? She said, do you see that? He went, I can smell it from here. Literally said that. Well, he obviously couldn't smell it. It was fake. Have fun with your kids. Tickle them, play with them, laugh with them. Rules without relationship tend to result in rebellion. Look at Proverbs 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine. When I transitioned to church and everybody in the community was just beating me to a pulp, saying all kinds of things about me, I was so low. And I mean, I'm sure I was in a clinical depression, didn't know it. Say, what helped you get out of that? My answer is going to surprise you. Jeff Foxworthy. I discovered Jeff Foxworthy, and I began to listen to his stuff and laugh. And I desperately needed to laugh because all I felt like doing was crying. A joyful heart is good medicine. Laughing is healthy. Have fun. As a church, we're really serious and we can be really silly. Be like that. Be like that. Now as adults, we learn together. We're all learners. We're all readers. We get together. We talk about relationships, parenting, emotional intelligence, how the brain works, current events, you name it. The most stimulating conversations I ever have are with my wife and my 2 daughters. It's always a blast. And we still laugh together. We come across funny things. We send them to each other. My favorite times are these times with them. Everybody's reading. Everybody's learning. Everybody's clever. Everybody's funny. We have a lot of fun. Now, don't miss what I'm about to say, because some of you need to hear this. You do have control over how you raise your kids. You do not have control over what they may choose to do someday as teenagers or adults. You understand that? You can do it right and your kids still go wrong. Because one day they decide, one day your power's gone. And hopefully you put good stuff in them. Hopefully they're going to realize what good stuff you put in them and follow what you've done and taught them. But not all of them will. So some of you probably have a kid who's a bit of a prodigal or maybe a massive prodigal. And you think, I must have been a horrible parent. And you weren't. You might have been a really good parent. I've seen people I thought were really good parents have kids who go south. And I frankly have seen people I thought were lousy parents turn out great kids. It happens both ways. Parenting well is probably the hardest work you'll ever do. It's 24/7 till the day they leave home. If you do it well, it'll pay dividends until the day you die. Stock market's way up for me, way up for me in the child dividend department. If you don't do it well, it'll cost you till the day you die.